Have you ever walked away from a conversation with that strange feeling? That feeling of, why does it seem like nobody really gets me? Not because you said something wrong, but because what you were trying to express got lost somewhere along the way, or maybe this has happened to you. You share something you feel deeply, and the other person responds with a generic phrase. Something like, don't worry, it'll pass, or you're overthinking it. And you think, but that's not what I was saying at all. Or maybe you're the kind of person who has 1,000 interests, who switches topics fast, who connects ideas in ways that seem like random leaps to everyone else. And sometimes you feel like you're too much, too intense, too complex, too different. Well, today I want to tell you something important. What you feel is not a design flaw. It's a signal of something much deeper. And in this video, we're going to explore it together, grounded in real psychology, not pretty Instagram quotes. Stay until the end, because what we're about to see might change the way you understand yourself. Short pause. First, I need to dismantle a belief you've probably been carrying for years. The belief that if people don't understand you, the problem is you. That idea is devastating, and it's also false. Psychology tells us that human beings tend to simplify other people. Our brain needs to put people into categories quickly to save cognitive energy. Hero or villain, serious or funny, shy or outgoing. The problem happens when there are people who don't fit into any category. People whose personality is multidimensional, whose emotions don't follow the expected script, whose way of thinking blends the analytical with the poetic, the rational with the deeply sensitive. And what does the human brain do when it can't classify something? It gets uncomfortable. And when it gets uncomfortable, it sometimes concludes that the problem is with what it can't classify. In other words, you. But that's not a judgment about your worth. It's a limitation of the human perception system. There's an enormous difference between being hard to read and being hard to love. Pause. Now let's go a little deeper. Why are some people inherently harder to understand than others? There are several factors that science identifies, and what's interesting is that almost all of them are connected to traits we generally associate with intelligence: creativity and sensitivity. The first has to do with high sensory processing sensitivity. Researcher Elaine Aron identified in the 1990s a personality trait that affects approximately 15 to 20% of the population. Highly sensitive people have a nervous system that processes stimuli with greater depth and nuance. This means that when you watch a film, you don't just watch it, you feel it in layers. When someone says something to you, you don't just hear the words, you pick up on the tone, the micro-expression, the context, the intention. Your brain literally processes more information than average. The result is that your inner experience is rich, dense, and very hard to transmit with simple words. And when you try to communicate it, the other person might feel like you're exaggerating or overcomplicating things. You're not exaggerating, you just see more. Pause. The second factor is divergent and connective thinking. There are people whose brain operates in high-intensity associative mode. They connect ideas from different fields, jump from the concrete to the abstract in seconds, see patterns where others see chaos. This is what psychologists call divergent thinking. It's the foundation of creativity and many forms of brilliance. But it also creates a communication problem. When your mind is traveling at 200 miles per hour down roads only you know, it's hard for others to follow the map. Not because the map is wrong, but because it's unique. Pause. And the third factor is emotional intensity. Psychologist Kazimierz Dabrowski described what he called overexcitabilities, an expanded capacity to feel, imagine, think, and move through the world. People with high emotional intensity don't feel more or less than others. They feel differently, with greater amplitude, greater duration, and greater complexity. The problem is that our culture tends to normalize moderate emotionality. When someone feels with great intensity, they usually receive messages like, "You're too sensitive, you take everything too personally, stop being so dramatic." And so they learn to hide. They learn to compress who they are to fit into a world that was never designed for them. Pause. Now, understanding the mechanism is powerful, but we also need practical tools. Because knowing you're complex is one thing, and learning to live with it in a healthy way is another. The first tool is learning to translate, not to simplify yourself. There's an important difference between simplifying who you are and translating what you feel. Simplifying means cutting parts of yourself to fit in. Translating means finding the bridge between your inner world and the other person's vocabulary. Instead of saying, "I just feel a lot of things at once and I don't know how to explain it," try anchoring one specific emotion first. "Right now I feel frustrated even though there's more underneath." The anchor gives the other person a point of entry into your world. The second tool is finding your tribe, not your audience. Not everyone has the capacity or the desire to understand you in depth, and that's okay. What you need is not for everyone to understand you. What you need is to have a few connections where you can be fully seen. The people who are drawn to your complexity exist. They're the ones who, when you share something, instead of saying, "Stop overthinking it," say, "Tell me more." The third is documenting your inner world. One of the most powerful practices for people with high internal complexity is structured journaling. It's not about writing a diary of, "Today I did this and that." It's about making the invisible visible, putting on paper the patterns you notice in yourself, the connections you make, the emotions that don't fit into a single word. This has two benefits. First, it helps you know yourself better. And second, over time, it gives you a more precise language for communicating with others. And the fourth tool is learning to manage your relational energy. If you're a person of high sensitivity or intensity, social interactions cost you more energy than average. Not because you're antisocial, but because your nervous system processes more. This means you need to honor your recharge time. Setting limits is not selfishness, it's system maintenance. Pause. Before we move on, I need to be honest with you about something. Everything we've talked about describes traits that, in themselves, are neutral or even valuable. But in certain contexts, or when not managed well, they can become real obstacles. If you feel that your complexity leads you to isolate constantly, to have serious difficulties in all your relationships, or to live in a state of chronic frustration from not being understood, it might be worth exploring whether something else is at play. Some profiles like ADHD, autism spectrum disorder, or giftedness share many of these characteristics and sometimes require specific support. Seeing a psychologist doesn't mean you're broken. It means you want to understand yourself better. And that's exactly what this channel is about. Pause. I want to close this video by telling you something I wish someone had told you before. The most interesting people in the world, the ones who create things that didn't exist before, the ones who care for others with unusual depth, the ones who ask questions nobody else asks, are almost always people who at some point in their life felt hard to understand. Your complexity is not a problem to be solved. It's a territory to be explored. The goal is not to become simpler. The goal is to learn to inhabit your complexity with grace, to know when to show yourself in your full extension and when to be more selective, to know who is worth the effort of translating yourself for and who isn't. And above all, to stop interpreting other people's incomprehension as evidence that something in you is wrong, because it's not. Pause. To close, being hard to understand is not a flaw, but the result of processing the world with greater depth than average. The human brain has a bias toward simplicity, and complex people don't fit well into those schemes. But that says more about the human perception system than about your worth. The mindset shift I'm offering you is this. Stop trying to make yourself more readable for everyone. Start investing in making yourself more understandable for the ones who matter. If this video resonated with you, save it and come back to it when you need a reminder. See you in the next one.